The Prime Minister has a corrosive complacency when it comes to defence.
Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch at war at PMQs over defence spending. Former Labour Defence Secretary Lord Robertson says the Prime Minister is showing corrosive complacency while the British Army has shrunk to its smallest size in centuries.
Keir Starmer completely lost control during a heated PMQs clash over Britain's military, because he was pushed on a basic issue he still cannot resolve. He has no clear defense investment plan, no timeline, and no answers. Under pressure, he defaulted to deflection and talking points, exposing weak leadership while serious concerns about national security kept mounting.
My responsibility is to keep the British people safe, and that is a duty I take seriously. That is why I don't agree with his comments.
Boring, dull, whiny. Kemi is doing it very well. And
you are partisan in this.
I'm viewing as an independent-minded observer.
I'm watching this and I keep thinking, how does Keir Starmer stand there week after week and still not grasp what PMQs is supposed to be? It's not a press conference. It's not a campaign rally. It's direct questioning. You get asked something specific, you answer it. That's the job.
While Labour faces a political earthquake as polling for the Telegraph reveals that it is set to lose control in Wales for the first time since devolution.
But Keir Starmer doesn't answer. He pivots. He blames. He drags up the past, and then he wonders why the Speaker has to step in and literally remind him to answer the question. That happened in Parliament, on record. That's not a strong leader under pressure. That's someone stalling because they don't have the answer ready.
Is Labour's failure to increase defence spending a betrayal of our troops? While Labour faces a political earthquake as polling for the Telegraph reveals that it is set to lose control in Wales for the first time since devolution.
And the way Keir Starmer handles that pressure tells you everything. Instead of addressing the missing defence plan, he starts talking about previous governments. Instead of explaining timelines, he starts listing percentages. Instead of clarity, you get noise. It's the same loop every time. Deflect, attack, repeat. But here's the problem. When you're talking about national security, that strategy doesn't just look weak, it looks dangerous. Because the question isn't political, the question is simple. Is the country prepared or not? And Keir Starmer keeps dancing around it like it's optional.
But the Prime is such a wet sock.
Now it gets worse because this wasn't just the opposition coming after Keir Starmer. This is where it really starts to sting. The criticism came from his own side. Lord Robertson, former Labour Defence Secretary, former NATO Secretary General. Not some random critic. This is someone who knows exactly what he's talking about. And what did he say? Britain is underprepared, underinsured, under attack, national security is in peril. That is not vague language. That is a direct warning, and it's aimed straight at Keir Starmer's leadership.
Mr. Speaker, he says he doesn't agree with Lord Robertson. Lord Robertson is a former Labour Defence Secretary, a former NATO Secretary General. He also said, and I quote, "We are underprepared, we are underinsured, we are under attack."
So what does Keir Starmer do when someone from his own camp drops that kind of statement? Does he explain? Does he correct the concern? Does he present data to counter it? No, he just says he disagrees. That's it. Think about that. One of the most experienced figures in defense says the country's not ready, and Keir Starmer responds like it's a difference of opinion over dinner. No urgency, no detail, just dismissal. That's not leadership. That's avoidance dressed up as confidence.
Mr. Speaker, Lord Robertson's criticisms were of the Prime Minister, and he said Britain's national security is in peril. Our armed forces are at the end of their tether, waiting for this government to fund the Strategic Defence Review.
And then you hear the follow-up. Armed forces at the end of their tether, waiting for funding, waiting for direction, waiting for something concrete. That's not a political attack. That's a system under strain. And Keir Starmer is standing there acting like repeating record spending somehow fixes that reality. It doesn't. Because the people actually involved in defense are not asking for slogans. They're asking for a plan, and Keir Starmer still doesn't have one ready to show.
Keir Starmer's defence to the accusation that you've got a strategic defence review, can you please implement it? And we haven't seen this defence investment plan yet, promised in autumn, Still haven't seen it. Where is it? That's the Badenoch line of attack. And this is the Prime Minister's defence, which is basically to point at the Tories and say, it's all your fault.
Which brings me to the most embarrassing part of this entire situation, the missing defence investment plan. This is not a surprise deadline. This is not something new. Keir Starmer promised this plan months ago. Last autumn, that was the timeline. We are now sitting months past that. Not a few weeks late, not a minor delay. We're talking about roughly 6 months with nothing delivered. And when he gets asked about it, he still cannot give a clear date. Just, we need to get it right. How many times are you going to say that before people realize there is nothing ready?
The military and the defence industry want to hear about what he's going to do, not him prosecuting past governments. He promised the defence investment plan would be He promised that the defence investment plan would be published last autumn. I asked him at PMQs 6 weeks ago when it would be published. He had no idea.
And here's the part that makes Keir Starmer look even worse. He has already had the review. The Strategic Defence Review is done. The blueprint exists. Experts have already laid it out. So what exactly is taking so long? That's the question no one can get an answer to. Because if the plan was ready, he would show it. If the plan was solid, he would defend it. But instead, Keir Starmer keeps delaying, keeps pushing it forward, keeps hoping the question goes away. It doesn't. It keeps coming back, louder each time. Now let's talk about the numbers, because this is where Keir Starmer really starts stretching things. He stands there and talks about £270 billion. He talks about the biggest increase since the Cold War.
There are still 2 weeks of the parliamentary session left. So why won't the Prime Minister publish the defence investment plan before then?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I remind the House that we put in place the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. Mr. Speaker, let me spell that out.
He throws out percentages like 2.6%, 3.5%, and expects everyone to just accept it at face value. But when you actually break those numbers down, it starts looking very different, because those figures are not just military spending. They include pensions. They include intelligence agencies. They include nuclear costs that were previously counted separately.
What a contrast. When they came into office, defence spending was 2.5%. When they left, it was 2.3%. When they came into office, the army was 100,000. When they left office, 72,000.
So when you strip all that out, what are you actually left with? Around 1.6% of GDP going into real, usable military capability. That's the number that matters. Not the headline, not the inflated total. The actual spending that goes into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. And suddenly, Keir Starmer's record spending doesn't look so impressive anymore. It looks like accounting tricks. It looks like presentation over substance. And it raises a very simple question. Why is Keir Starmer more focused on how the numbers look than what they actually deliver?
She said at the weekend, our defence is the weakest for 400 years. That is what they left behind.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about the biggest sustained increase. Talking about an increase is not the same as giving an increase.
Because that's the pattern here. Keir Starmer talks about increases, but avoids showing outcomes. He talks about commitments, but avoids timelines. He talks about responsibility, but avoids accountability. And when all of that gets challenged at the same time, in a setting like PMQs where he cannot control the flow, you start seeing the cracks. The interruptions, the deflection, the frustration, that's what people are calling a meltdown. Not because he shouted, but because he had no clear answer when it mattered most.
This is, Labour MPs are laughing. Labour MPs are laughing, Mr. Speaker. This is a moment of profound national seriousness. And what are they doing? They're promoting sex toys in Parliament. That's what they're doing. Mr. Speaker, it gives a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns.
And this is the core issue. This entire situation is not about one bad exchange. It's about a pattern. Keir Starmer is being asked direct questions about national defense, and he is not giving direct answers. He is being challenged with facts from his own side, and he is brushing them off. He is presenting numbers that do not reflect reality and hoping no one looks deeper. That might work in a speech. It does not work in Parliament. And it definitely does not work when the topic is the security of an entire country.
We are reforming welfare and spending more on defence. They did neither. The welfare bill rose by £88 billion on their watch. It soared by £33 billion under the Shadow Chancellor's watch.
And now this is where Keir Starmer's entire narrative completely collapses, because it's not just about inflated numbers anymore. It's about what's actually happening behind the scenes. While he stands there talking about record funding, there are reports of the Treasury pushing for £3 to £3.5 billion in cuts to the defense budget. Think about that for a second. On one hand, Keir Starmer is selling this image of historic investment. On the other hand, his own government is quietly trying to pull billions out of defense spending. Now add another layer to this, because the argument doesn't stop at budgets. It moves into priorities. This is where the welfare versus defense debate comes in, and Keir Starmer really starts to struggle. Because the accusation is straightforward. You cannot keep expanding welfare spending while claiming to strengthen national defense without explaining where the trade-offs are. And when that line gets thrown at him, backed by the statement that you cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget, Keir Starmer again does the same thing. He avoids the core issue.
Let's stop talking about what I didn't say. Let's start talking about what he isn't doing. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that on Monday, I offered to work with the Prime Minister to identify the welfare savings we need. What did he say? No thanks.
He says they're doing both. That's the answer. Just a blanket statement with no breakdown, no specifics, no numbers tied directly to outcomes. And that's the problem, because when you look at the context, welfare spending has risen massively. We're talking tens of billions. That is not small change. That is a huge portion of government spending. So when Keir Starmer claims he's balancing both sides, people naturally ask, where exactly is the balance? Where is the evidence that defense is getting the priority it needs? And again, there is no clear answer.
If you're going to support and make your country safe, you have to get the right calls on the big issues. She called for us to jump into the war. They can pretend otherwise. I remember walking in, standing here for the first time, saying we would not get drawn into the war, we would not join the offensive, and they all shouted, shame!
And instead of addressing that, Keir Starmer flips back into attack mode. He criticizes the opposition, he brings up past failures, he throws out comparisons, but none of that answers the question being asked, because the question is about his decisions right now under his leadership. And the more he avoids that, the more it starts to look like he doesn't have a convincing explanation. It starts to look like the criticism is hitting closer to the truth.
The Strategic Defence Review is a 10-year blueprint for national security. The Defence Investment Plan will put that into effect. It will be published as soon as possible. We need to get it right. We inherited plans that were uncosted and undeliverable.
Than he wants to admit. Then we get to the part that really exposes the gap between words and actions. Actual military decisions. Not theories, not projections, real concrete choices. The HMS Dragon upgrade is a perfect example. This was a planned upgrade to improve missile interception capability. Something directly tied to modern threats. And what happens? The plan gets paused, not delayed for a clear reason, not restructured with an alternative, just paused. And when Keir Starmer is asked a direct question about it, whether he will approve and fund it, he does not give a direct answer.
Now that Lord Robertson has said, and I quote, "We cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget," will the Prime Minister think again and work with us to find savings to fund defence?
He goes right back to the same routine. Blame the previous government. Talk about inherited problems. Shift the focus away from the decision he just made. But this isn't about history. This is about a current capability that could directly impact national security. And Keir Starmer still refuses to engage with it properly. That tells you everything you need to know about how these decisions are being handled. It's reactive, it's political, it's not grounded in a clear, consistent strategy.
But the trouble is he didn't really answer the question, did he?
And the Speaker had to pull him up for turning it into Leader of the Opposition's questions. And Lindsay's been criticised for not making the Prime Minister answer the question. He can't do that. That's not his job.
And this is where the entire situation starts to look less like governance and more like a performance. Because while all of this is happening, while serious questions about defense are being raised, the tone in Parliament starts to shift into something else entirely. You have MPs laughing. You have bizarre side comments. You have distractions that have nothing to do with the core issue. And in the middle of all that, Keir Starmer is not pulling things back to seriousness. He's participating in the same atmosphere. That is why this moment matters. Not because of the shouting, not because of the arguments, but because it reveals a pattern of avoidance, of deflection, of focusing on presentation over substance. And when that pattern shows up in something as critical as national defense, it stops being just political theater. It becomes a serious question about leadership. And right now, based on everything we've seen, Keir Starmer is not answering that question in a way that inspires confidence.